let's go ahead and let's read Psalms 14. It is a very tiny one, 7 little verses. So online, if you don't have it, I got it. If you don't have it here, it's going to be on the screen. Let's start with Psalms 14, verse 1. The fool says in his heart. What does the fool say? Let's read it all together. There's no God. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do vile deeds. There is no one who does good. Verse 2. And the Lord looks down from heaven on the human race to see if there is one who is wise, one who seeks God. All, verse 3, all have turned away. All alike have become corrupt. There is no one. How many? No one. There is no one who does good, not even one. Verse 4. Will evildoers never understand? Will they never understand? They consume my people as they consume bread. They do not call on the Lord. Then they will be filled with dread, for God is with those who are righteous. You sinners frustrate the plans of the oppressed, but the Lord is his refuge. O Israel, that Israel's deliverance would come from Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. Verse 14. Now, as an interesting common trait that online, I don't know if you're watching me for the first time. If you are, we don't know each other, obviously, but I'm telling you now, an interesting thing we all have, an interesting trait we all have, is our natural tendency to rebel, to do our own things and to want to do things against the grain sometimes, and even knowingly, sometimes we refuse to do what we know is right. Think about that. How many times, and I know it's been a lot, you all lost count, how many times have you done the complete opposite knowing it's not right? All right, we've all done that. And some of us have gone a little further. Some of us is like, you know what, I've tried that before, it didn't work. Yeah, let's give that another go. We even do that to see, will I get a different result by doing the same thing? And so there is, and some of you guys definitely know, I've used this analogy, but I felt like it's a good one. One of the things in which I've applied this, and I do this kind of regularly, I've learned my lesson, is when I drive. And so I've been enjoying the veterans lately over the summer. Traffic is so much nicer. But my POV, can we put the car, my POV is not going to look like this one starting Monday. It's going to look so full and bumper to bumper very soon when school gets back on. But guys, one of the places in which I tend to do, and I go against my better instincts, is while driving, I don't take my wife's advice. Listen, I'm telling you now, I don't know how she does it, all right? I don't know how she does it. It cannot be a spiritual gift, but apparently it is. She just has this weird inact sense of traffic flow before it even happens. I mean, anybody know people like that? They just know traffic. And I'm like, look, turn here to that's going to slow down. Dude is like, how do you know this? And so it's kind of nuts to see that. And now here's the thing. When I drive, she's very efficient when she drives. She wants to get to point A to point B as quickly as possible. Me, listen, as long as I'm in my lane, I'm good. All right. Sometimes I just want to cruise. Sometimes I'm locked in, that's it. That's all I want to do. That drives her insane. And so there are times in which she says, hey, switch over to the next lane because it's going to move faster. And I'm like, you know what? Just for kicks and giggles, let's just stay and let's see what's going to happen. All right. You know what doesn't happen? She doesn't giggle. All right. She does not giggle. And you know what also happens? She was right. All right. I don't know how she does it every single time. But the thing is that as we all have a rebellious reflex, don't we? And especially it's when somebody says, don't do that. Don't do that. You can't do that way. It's not going to work. Even more, we have a rebellious reflex that we want to prove ourselves or to prove things. Sometimes we could be right? Isn't that sometimes we could be right. And somebody can be negative and you're true. So that could be a little bit difficult here. But we all have a rebellious reflex to our detriment. And so Psalms since Psalms 3, because I'd started Psalms last year. Since Psalms 3, if you go back and look, starting in Psalms 3, there has been complaining happening from Psalms 3 and 4 all the way through. There's been one element of complaint or another, if you check it out. And in Psalms 3, David, which is a big one, and other people, other authors, they have been crying out against the brokenness in this world. They've been complaining about people and this, not just non-believers, but believers that sometimes don't act like it. And there's this negative frustration. Well, Psalms 14, if you literally pull the thread from Psalms 3, Psalms 14, now David has found and followed the stream to the source. And he sees, this is where we see the source of it. In fact, all of what they're complaining about out there, David traces it all now to the stream that leads to where? In here. Inside of my heart, inside of yours. And so let's look at this one thing that David finds when we look internally. And he sees something called this. So this first couple verses, we see total depravity here. Now, somebody can use depravity in many different ways, but honestly, what we look at with this word, it's the fact that the problem is worse than you and I could ever imagine. And so you look at this, and how many people in the first part does it say do good? How many? It says no one. There's not one that does good. There's not one. In fact, all have been corrupt. And it opens up with a powerful declaration. It's like eureka. It's like one of those moments where David's like, oh my gosh, I see it. I get it. And he opens up with the phrase what? The fool says in his heart. What does the fool say? There is no God. Now, when you think the fool says in his heart there is no God, what would we call that person? An atheist? Could be one. They could be. Because what an atheist says, there is no God. All right? I'm going to show you that there's actually another group that you can kind of slide in here. But that phrase, there is no God, which shocked me because every time I read that, I always assumed this is a logical conclusion that somebody made. I'm like, oh, well, there's reasons for this and there's reasons for that. Have you ever heard of somebody give a really good argument for the fact that God does not exist? And you were like, whoa, I don't know how to answer that. Have you ever heard one of those before? Been there? Not fun. Because maybe it's like, wow, that's an interesting argument. I mean, I believe you're wrong, but how do I answer that? How do I answer you in that moment? Well, guys, I want you to know that the conclusion that the fool says here, the fool is not somebody who says, you know what, I've thought about it. I've researched, I've done this and I've done that, and I have come to the logical conclusion there is no God. That phrase is not a phrase, there is no God, does not come from a place of doubt. It comes from a place of defiance. It's not a logical conclusion. It's actually an emotional expression. In fact, if you look back at some of the Psalms that I did last summer in 3 and 4 and some of those, there's one that the fool in essence says they wish that God's chains would just be off them. They want to be free from God. And so the fool says in his heart, there is no God, is an expression of someone that wishes God does not exist. It's not just, I don't want you in my life, it's I wish you did not exist. I don't want you. It's an emotional reaction, not so much a logical one. Now, doesn't mean that people can make those logical arguments. I get it. But you know what? Deep down, any logical argument somebody will give you for the existence that God does not exist, they are looking for the emotional and logical loopholes to reinforce their deepest desires, which is, I don't want there to be a God. Why would somebody not want that? Think about it. If there is no God, then what? Maybe no repercussions. What is good? What's another positive that you think is a positive result of there not being a God? Well, God doesn't have to hold me accountable. I don't have to follow God's rules. What's another one? It almost sounds like freedom, doesn't it? It almost sounds like freedom. And so that is so sad. Now, here, in fact, you know what I said earlier? We talked about atheists, right? You know what's crazy about this phrase here? When it says, there is no God. There is no God. In this context that we're seeing, the word Yahweh is used, which is the personal, revealed word of God. So that means that there are people, the fool has heard the gospel. The fool has heard the good news and says, I don't care. I don't want there to be a God. You see that rebellious reflex all the way deep down inside. This is about personal rebellion. This is not ignorance. This is deep at the heart. Now, one of the things that I read in a commentary that I thought was interesting for us is that one commentary person says David does not blame God's people for the condition of these fools. Nowhere does David say, well, hey, if us as a people of God, if we are failing, and that's why there's so many people rejecting God. Have you ever, and I've heard this, and I've actually grown, I don't like this language anymore. I was like, God, the church has failed over the last 100 years, or the church has failed over the last 2,000 years. The church has failed. You guys ever hear the church has failed language before? It's a popular expression. Because there'll be one, here's why. A pastor would say, the church has failed by X and Y, but we got it down. And they always use a kind of way to justify themselves, like we're right, everyone else is, Listen, the thing is, the reason why there's people who reject God, it's not necessarily because the church has failed. It doesn't matter. You can present everything beautiful, perfect, and for some people, it will not be enough. How do we know that? You can look at Judas. Judas heard every sermon Jesus ever said from the beginning, and it wasn't enough for Judas. He wanted the money. He was in it for what? He was in it for himself, for his glory and his good. He was in it for himself. So, guys, yes, does it mean, look, can our Christian testimony be negative in a way that it can turn somebody off? Oh, yes, 100%. So I'm not saying that. But this language that, listen, be careful. I think I've learned to be careful about, listen, to stop talking about God's girl. That's Jesus' bride. Like, we got to be cautious because it doesn't matter. You and I could do everything. We can make the move to Saturday, do this, and make every effort. And it still won't be enough for people. And that's something for us to embrace because unfortunately, guys, not enough people arrive to the same conclusion that G.K. Chesterton did. Guys, I don't know what it is about certain theologians that they like their first names of their first two acronyms. I thought about it. Mine don't sound good. I.J. Sotolongo don't sound good. And so I've thought about it. I was like, no, T.J. Sotolongo don't sound good neither. I'm not doing that one. And so G.K. Chesterton, if you want somebody, search him up. Quotes from G.K. Chesterton. Really cool dude. Very, very, very good. Somebody asked him a question one time. And this, again, what I said is that not enough people arrived to the same place that G.K. did. And somebody asked him one time in a letter, Sir, it's a very old guy, been dead for a long time. Sir, what's wrong with the world? G.K., he writes back and he says, Dear sirs, I am sincerely yours, G.K. Chesterton. End of the letter. There's not enough of us that realize I'm as much of the problem. The problem is not so much out there. What's wrong with the world? He says, I am. Too many people don't get there. What do they do instead? Oh, well, it's that political party. Or it's that. It's him. It's that. It's everybody else. If everybody just listened to me, maybe one of those. If I was in charge. Not enough get to that. Not enough we don't get to that place. In fact, we all have a problem, which is sin, which makes us the problem. So if we wanted God to be able to say, Lord, do something to the problem, end it. Yikes. Talking about a little blip there, it's going to go. It's all of us. And you know that for some of you, all right, let's see here who's really paying attention. All right, I know we haven't talked about Romans in a while, but did anything sound familiar when we read Psalms 14? He says, the Lord looks down from heaven on the human race to see if there is anyone who is wise, anyone who seeks God. All have turned away. All alike have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. That's Romans 3. Paul quotes Romans 3 when he's in the middle of talking about the problem that you and I all face, and that's us. And then he uses that to bring about the good news, right? What's the bad news? We have all stand and stood guilty before God. There is a problem in us. And here's the conclusion for that. You want a logical conclusion? If the problem is within us, that means the solution has to be somewhere else. It can't be from here. It has to be somewhere else because we have the problem. We have a problem there. Now, we go from the total depravity to then now total opposition. Paul, what he's talking about, David here in verse 4, 5, and 6, he is bringing about now the ultimate conclusion and kind of highlighting and reviewing what the Psalms have been saying some of these people do. And when he talks about this, he says the fool, look what he does in verse 4. Will evildoers never understand? In essence, he's asking a question. Won't they get it? Will they ever see? And what won't they see? He says, they consume my people as they consume bread. They do not call on the Lord. You know what we see this idea. And guys, look at it. You see it all throughout human history. You could see it in the news today. The more godless a society becomes, the more injustice happens towards people. The more people begin to realize, you know what? Because there is no God and we want to be God, they begin to pick the winners and the losers. Talking about, whole survival of the fittest. If that was a thing, survival of the fittest. Man, today who gets to be the judge of who is fit? You see what I'm saying? We do. Who gets to be the judge who is fit and who should survive or not? And so we pick and choose and we mistreat and we find every way to justify. I can be nice to you and I can be this to that. You're good, you deserve that. That's what happens when we take God out of the equation. And so here, what do we see? The fool preys on people, P-R-E-Y. The fool preys on people and they never pray, P-R-A-Y, to God. And so we see this negative, the corruption of the human being begins, we consume one another. Where we literally consume one another. But notice he says here that they will be full of dread. There will come a time in which they will be full of dread. Why? Because the very God, and dread is like fear and horror. Because they will come to realize what they have been doing to others. They will be held accountable when they stand before God, guilty and helpless, no defense, no aid. They will be full of dread when what they wanted, no God, is now right there and it becomes undeniable. They will be full of dread. Guys, and it's because of that, that you and I, and we see this, to me, the most shocking thing in me going over the Psalms the last couple of years, this year and last, is seeing David's heart towards the lost. When he says things like, bust him in the teeth, break his arm, snap his neck. They didn't say snap necks, but, all the other stuff, like break his teeth, break the arm, cut off their tongue. I would read that as David feeling like frustrated and God's letting him have a pass. But all of those, David never is approaching and wishing for wicked non-believers for violence. He's not. He is literally in all those things, in essence, praying, Lord, man, break through to them. Help them to stop. Help them to see what they're doing. Break their influence. Silence their tongues. Lord, whatever it is, help them to see before it's too late. I was shocked. He intercedes for them. He is not wishing for violence. He's not excited that they're going to get what's coming to them. He is praying for the lost. But here's the frustrating part. Did you even read that part here? He says, talking about fools, they will be, verse 6, sinners, meaning people who stand in their sin. Sinners will frustrate the plans of the oppressed. And the oppressed aren't just the poor. The oppressed are the Christians, those who are poor in heart and realize, believers in God. He says the sinners are going to frustrate their plans. And what is the plan of the righteous? What are the plans of the oppressed? To help them. And so that is the most interesting thing, in that we must remember that, like David writes, unfortunately, they're going to frustrate every plan we're going to have to help them. And that's where I warn you on some of this stuff. For us, again, to make a move from Sunday to Saturday, it's evangelistic at its core. But the frustrating thing is that, again, it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what we do. It's never going to be enough. They will love, and the enemy would love to frustrate all plans. And we're going to be frustrated when people don't listen. Anybody ever been there? Had a conversation with a loved one, a neighbor, and you just like, can I knock literally some sense into him? Does that work? No. I was like, how many, if you could, how many you could, you would get a nice swift, we get one shot. All right. Did it work? To literally knock some sense into somebody if it meant anything. But it doesn't work that way. We need to remember, guys, that when here's the crazy part. Because in all this frustrating thing, and all this, this seems dark and depressing. When we focus on what's wrong, sometimes we get to miss what's right. Very easy for us. When we focus so much on what's going wrong, we miss on what's right. For example, me and my family, we did our spring summer cleaning. So we go and we deep clean the house during the summer, right before we go into school. So it's kind of like a way of resetting. And man, I was like, it was a lot. Anybody been through one of those? Like you clean your whole house, you clean something, and you just felt like somebody just like 4 people just beat you with sticks. It's like everything hurts, right? That was kind of a little bit. And so in the moment, it's like we can be like, oh my gosh, and we were sore for days. And I'm like, I'm so sore. And then you complain about, my back, my leg, my this, my that. And so obviously you can be complaining, rightfully so, for being sore cleaning your house. But what's right? I was like, I have a house to clean. But I'm grateful that I have a house to clean. Some of us, I get it. You might have, and I've been there. I've had jobs in which my job is the worst. Okay, my job is not fun. All right, I don't find purpose in anything in my job. I get it. I understand. But you focus so much on the negative. What could be a positive from that? You got a job. I was like, I hate my job. It's the worst. But at least I have a job. There can be people who are like, my church is full of hypocrites. My church is full of hypocrites. If my church is full of hypocrites, then be grateful they accepted you. Okay? Be grateful they accepted you. Birds of a feather go to church together. All right? That's just what they do. And I love hearing it. If somebody says, look, if you ever find a perfect church, don't join it. You'll ruin it. All right? And so that's just the reality of it. So we all tend to focus a lot on the negative. We miss the positive. And now there's a lot of negative to see here. But did you miss the shift? Something happened halfway through. At the very beginning, we're focusing on the fools. But did you notice that Psalms 14 began with one group where no one does good? And by the end, how many groups do we have? 2. What happened? How do we go from no one does good to now having a group that's called righteous? What happened? And so if you go and look back, guys, at all the Psalms from from 1, honestly, all the way through Psalms 14, you have those 2 groups on display every single time. He says that the Psalm declares there's the righteous and the wicked, those who believe in the Lord and those who don't. And so you have these 2 categories of people, those who pridefully reject God and others who humbly submit to him. And I think it's awesome that out of all of the things for Paul to talk about, he quotes Psalms 14 and in Romans 3 to talk about, look, the problem is big. All of us are guilty, Jew and non-Jew alike. We all stand and we've all been corrupted by sin. But Psalms 3 doesn't end there. If you've been with us, by Romans 8, we see, what did Jesus do? While we were still sinners, while we were foolish, what did Jesus do? He died for us. While we were yet sinners, he died for us. While we were fools, he gave his life for us. He remained faithful. And so, guys, when we see this, there is a shift here. There is a shift in which, yes, no one sought after God. No one did good except for one. Jesus succeeded where you and I failed. He is the one who did that. He is the one who did good, the one who sought after, the one to make it possible for there to be 2 groups. And notice it said here, for the sinners will be full of dread, but the sinners will frustrate the plans of the oppressed, but the Lord is their refuge. Another word that has popped up over and over and over again from Psalms 2 all the way here. The Lord is our refuge, our strong tower, our defense, our shield. That is who he is. That is who he is. And so when we look at this, we're remembering, yes, you know what? God not only rescues us from being with no hope to now hope. He not only rescues us, he is our refuge until our rescue is complete. And that's the thing, guys, I want you guys to think about. If Jesus has forgiven you of your sins, he has saved you, but he is still in the process of saving you until he returns and our rescue is complete. But the thing that I want us, as we're looking at verse 14, it could be frustrating. We all have people like this. And even us, right? You know, we can tend to know what's right and know what's better and reject God. But there is the hope of verse 7. Where, look at verse 7. It says, "O Israel." So this is a longing for King David. He says, "O Israel," Israel's deliverance would come from Zion. It's like he knows there are those who are oppressed and those, oppressed by the world. And talking about believers, David has confidence that from Mount Zion, salvation will come, and salvation belongs to the Lord. And he says, when the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. And so there is something in Psalms 2. I read it last week in Psalms 13. And now we see in Psalms 14. Last week, wasn't it a question, how long? Remember that for some of us who were here? How long, Lord? How much longer? Well, the question, how much longer, and the longing for salvation in verse 7, guys, has been answered on the cross. All of those things have been answered on the cross. In fact, Mount Zion is an actual place. You know, me and Alicia got to go there. It's where the city of David, where Jerusalem is on Mount Zion. And guess what is just off in the shadow of Mount Zion? A hill called Calvary, where Jesus laid down his life. Deliverance came and has come from Mount Zion, from that place. It has been fulfilled in him. And why? Because Jesus succeeded where we failed. Jesus' victory over sin and death is how Jesus' victory over sin and death is how he succeeded where we have failed, so that we can go from fools to forgiven. Because, guys, if you, prior to God, listen, you and I were all fools. Maybe you didn't know about God, but deep down he wasn't on your radar. You know, therefore all of us, we were all fools before we were ever forgiven. And what does the fool say again? There is no God. He doesn't want God. There is no God. But what does now to the forgiven say? The forgiven looks to a bloody cross and an empty grave and say, what? There he was. And one day, on the other side of death, guys, we will all get to shout with all of our hearts, there he is. There he is. We will all get this with joy, not dread, with joy in our hearts. We will get to look and say, there he is. There he is. That is what awaits all of us. And so if there's a bottom line, guys, I want you to remember it's this. Look, Jesus is, and we've been saying it over again, man. Finally, I talked about it. We sang it today. And there's been a common theme, which is a wonderful theme. We see it all throughout the scriptures. Jesus is faithful. He's faithful. Another reason to point to his faithfulness. And what I love about it is this. He was faithful, and Jesus is still faithful, especially to fools who turn to place their faith in him. Jesus is faithful even to fools who turn to place their faith in him. You know what the irony is about that? What does the world say to the Christian? There is a God and his name is Jesus. What does the world call that? What do they call us for that? Don't they call us fools? Right? The non-believing world will look to us to say there is a God and his name is Jesus. They'll look at us and say, you're a fool. You're a fool to believe that. You're a fool to believe. And I get it. Do you know that God says in scriptures that the wisdom of God just trumps the wisdom of this world? It doesn't make sense for some. For some, the power of God looks weak, and the wisdom of God looks foolish. But oh well. Like, see, the reality of it doesn't matter what it looks like. It works. It's real. It's real. And so Jesus is faithful, especially to fools who turn to place their faith in him. In fact, guys, let's be honest. Trusting in Jesus, is it foolish? No, what do we call it? Call it salvation. They say, a non-believing world will say, if you trust in Jesus, you're a fool. No, we look at him, that's not called foolish, bro. That's called wisdom. All right? Because there's salvation in there. Again, guys, in every which way, we do that. Like, look, would somebody say, or would you tell somebody, man, you're being foolish for doing this. But in the reality, it's not. Like, I showed you a picture of a POV of me driving, but JJ, can you put the other picture up? Look, every single one of us are born on the road to destruction. All of us are born on the road to destruction. And so if you are looking at this, and if you say, okay, if you go straight ahead, you are going to go into a storm that you will not survive in. Or take this off-ramp and you'll be able to survive. Would it be foolish to take the off-ramp? What would we call it? Wisdom. And this is what this is what God came to show us, that look, on your own, we are all headed on a road to destruction. But Jesus offered us the off-ramp. Through the cross and through the grave, he offered us the off-ramp in order to trust in him so that we could believe. Again, you would think, that's being foolish. No, man, it's like you say, well, if listening to your wife is foolish. No, it's wisdom, trust me, it's wisdom, all right? Listening, there's certain things that are wise. You don't want it to be that way, but just because you don't want it to be that way doesn't mean it's right. Do you see it? And that's the unfortunate thing, guys. We are not trying to deal, and as a church, it's one thing when somebody has honest questions. Hey, I'm really struggling to believe in God, but I just don't understand. But when there's a hunger and it's like, help me to think, help me to process, that's a good thing. This is why the vision statement that honestly came from you guys, I heard it. What do you guys love about our church? And all of your phrasing, I just pulled it all together and like saying, we want to be a church who loves to learn about the love of Jesus so that we can learn to love like Jesus. Like, we love to learn. And that's an important thing. And then with somebody that has honest questions, amen to that. That's great. But we're going to be dealing with people who, they don't care what you have to say. They don't want it. But to that person who doesn't want it, what should we do? Love them anyways, because you never know. You never know. You never know if it might be one more conversation, or the fact that they would belittle you and man, you remain calm and confident and loving towards them. You have zero clue that impact that testimony could have. Not so much what you say, but how you say it and how you continue to love and serve them despite them not listening to what you have to say. You never know what God can do through something like that. And so, guys, I want to challenge you, and if you're watching online, and maybe you're here. Only the Lord knows who are his. Listen, let me challenge you, don't be foolish enough to wish that there is no God, because that's what the fool says. The fool sees the evidence, but refuses to arrive at the conclusion. Did you see why they're a fool? Because it's so plain as day, but they refuse to see it. The fool, it's not because they're stupid or they don't understand. It's that a fool is somebody who just doesn't want to understand. The fool, don't be foolish enough to wish that there is no God. Why would you want that to be true? Why would you want it to be true that there is no God? Look at the world. When no one's in charge, guess what happens? Death and destruction and manipulation and corruption. Look, my family, I'm here in this country because they fled from a godless country in Cuba, where now, guess what? If God's not God, there's going to be somebody who's willing to step and play the role. There will always be somebody who would want to act like God and be God, and it's never worked, and it never will. Why would you want there to be no God? And I'm going to also challenge you too. You know what? Look, you think you can actually create a better one? I want you to try. Because if you think you can create a better God, I'm telling you, you won't. And if you think you can, you do not understand who the God of the Bible is. He is better than you can ever imagine. but he's also not going to fit into your little box. He is not what you want. He is what you need. And which actually, he is what you deep down want. You just don't know it yet. So guys, I'm going to just challenge you and anyone else that you may talk to. Don't be foolish to wish that there is not another God. But understand that if you wish that to be true, you're going to come to a conclusion one day. Here he says, you will be full with dread to realize you can't ignore it anymore. Now it's staring you in the face, and it is too late. You will have to now deal with the wrath of God for eternity instead of getting to experience the love of God. And I want you to see again, in your foolishness, what do you deserve? Exactly what you want. If God's in your foolishness, that's what you deserve. But what did Jesus do? He gave his life for fools like you and me, so that we can find hope and love. I mean, we reject him. How long did we reject him before we finally accepted him? And he remained slow to anger and abounding in great love. And so don't be foolish to miss out on another opportunity to repent of your sins, to trust in him. Because if you're going to be honest, you know, there's a problem in this world, and I pray that God may realize there's a problem here in your heart, and only Jesus can address it. He can kill the very thing in you without killing you. He died on the cross and rose from the grave so that can happen. And so don't be foolish. But for the rest of my church, look, for all of us, if you follow Jesus, and that's you, you and I could be foolish too. You could be foolish, because a fool would say, there is no God. So I'm going to challenge, hey, you as a church, if you call yourself a believer, don't be foolish enough to forget that there is a God, because that's our tendency. You and I can forget. And I'm going to tell you, there's going to be moments that you will, because emotions will get a little bit too much. And you know, when you get overwhelmed or too scared and a lot of times we forget in those moments, God is God. And that's in those moments that we pull back and we reflect. And so I want to challenge you, don't be foolish to forget that there is a God, because when life gets hard, what do we do? All right? What do? We tend to run to God. But you know what also, when life gets hard, you know what we do? When life gets hard, we sometimes live like God's not near. Don't we? I've done it too. When life gets hard, we forget that he's close. We forget that he's powerful. We forget that he's enough. When life is not going good, we sometimes forget that he's near. And when life is good, we live like we don't need him. Come on. Yes or no? When life is not good, we forget his promises and we forget he's close and nearby. But when life is good, we forget how much we still need him. So you see why I said earlier, Jesus is faithful even to fools, because you and I can still act foolishly. But you know what's so wonderful about that? Even in our foolishness, we don't fall out of God's grace. We don't fall through his grace fingers in moments like that. And so what I love here, look at Psalms 14:7. He says, oh, that Israel's deliverance would come from Zion, and when the Lord restores the fortunes of his people. Talking about salvation. When he does it, let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. Guys, I want to remind you that that has happened. And so with what Jesus did on the cross, and so no matter what is going on, you and I have a reason to rejoice. You and I have a reason to rejoice. You and I have a reason to be glad that we have such a God. We have more reason to be glad that we have such a God. And yes, frustration is real. The frustrations of this world, or even trying to reach others, that's going to be real. And I'm sure we're going to face frustrations in any change, in any move that we're trying to do. But you know what? As real as that frustration is, so is God's refuge. So is our God. And so, again, we all have that tendency, guys, to be foolish from time to time. We all have that tendency. So I want to just challenge you to catch yourself, realize what you're doing, and reject, and choose to reject the love of this world and resist the lie. Because what we want to do is we want to reject God and resist him. No, let's reject not his love and not resist the truth. Let's reject the love of this world, and let's learn to resist the lies of this world. A lie that living a life without God is better than living one with him. Because what is the truth? There is no life apart from Christ. There is none. And if you've been a fool, now's the time to come to your senses. And I want to encourage you, let us stop wishing that there was no God, or catching ourselves when we start wondering and acting like if he's not the real, and let us be glad that we have a God, and his name is Jesus. He is the salvation that came from Zion. He is the joy of the righteous. He is the refuge of the weary, the dread of the wicked, and the delight of the redeemed. And one day when Jesus returns in glory, both fool and forgiven will stand and say, there he is. Amen? Come on.